Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Uplift. This week I'm joined by Margaret in studio and she's going to share her story. Struggling after an abortion is something many women experience, yet it is shrouded in silence. Today we are joined by Margaret in studio who will share her story and how abortion has affected her. Thank you, Margaret, for joining me in studio today. Would you mind sharing your story?
Hey, not at all, and thank you for asking me.
No problem.
Well, I had 2 abortions in my life, and the first, back in 1974, and this was when I was in a relationship with a married colleague at work. But for me, I was 27 years old and believing this was the love of my life, but also, I think quite naively, believing that, I only see him occasionally and it's, how would you say, I wasn't expecting any more from him than maybe an occasional coffee or whatever. But anyway, 3 months into the relationship, and I found myself pregnant. And again, when I look back and I think, my goodness, how naive you were, because at work, and I was being sick in the mornings, and I thought, what's that?
Yeah.
And until I missed 2 periods, I thought there's something wrong and took a pregnancy test. And again, the impact, the shock of that, and I know many women, when you find out you're pregnant and it's not in the ideal circumstance, your life's out of your control. So it is a crisis, and what's the future going to be like? Can I cope? And I think there was a very short time, a window, if you like, where, because I was having the baby of the man I loved, it was a baby. But when the time came for me to tell him, when the rubber hits the road, the reality kicks in, and he said, well, what happened was that he had to go back home and explain to his wife, and there's a whole scenario or a whole backstory of he came up from England to where we were working, so his wife was still living down south. But anyway, the outcome of that was that, Margaret, I don't know what you're going to do, but I won't be with you. And for me, that was when really the terror hit me, and I thought, I can't do this. And then the very strong denial kicked in, and that was where the baby was no longer a baby, it was a pregnancy. So I went to my own doctor, and she didn't talk to me or didn't explain what other options, or how do you feel about this, Margaret? Just to talk about it. I'll see you, I'll arrange your first antenatal appointment. And so I left the doctor's surgery even more frightened than I had when I went in, because I thought she was going to tell me something that would take this knot out of my stomach. Anyway, I had a friend, the only one that I told, she had worked down south, and she had heard of the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, as was, it's now BPAS, and they didn't have an office in Glasgow, but you could phone, chat to a counsellor, and the arrangement was that the nearest clinic was in Liverpool. So I travelled down to Liverpool and with the father, I said, I'm not going, I can't go on my own, and you'll have to go with me. So that was okay, and of course he said, and he would pay for it because it was a private clinic. And when I got there, the counselling that was provided, or that they give, was 2 questions. Are you in a supported situation, and can you cope? And I said no to both. And the only question I asked was, is it a baby yet? And they said, oh no, it's just cells, it's just a blob. And it was I was coming up for 10 weeks gestation, and it was a surgical termination. Again, I'd never been in hospital before. It was a clinic, but I'd never experienced a general anaesthetic, and nobody knew apart from, I'll call him James, that where I was, and my friend, and really was quite afraid. But anyway, they explained the general anaesthetic. Didn't say much about the procedure, and after I was given the anaesthetic, and when I woke up, it was I didn't realise it was all over. But for me, and because of my denial, I really was so relieved. I got my life back, and but there was a very big difference. On travelling down, he was the man that I thought I was in love with. But when he came to pick me up, it was as if he was a stranger, and I didn't want anything to do with him. And that's just to explain aspects of the emotions that, for me, that I was going through. So in believing that, that's it, I've got to get on with my life, I did not acknowledge the baby at all, and for the next 9 years I was in denial. I focused on my career, but we're, as human beings, are created body, mind and spirit. So maybe in our mind we can shut off, but certainly not in our bodies. And I didn't realise that I'd become anorexic. I didn't eat, and not that I was heavy then, but I certainly lost a tremendous amount of weight, but not aware of it. And it wasn't until a photograph that was taken at an office party, and someone said, oh, look, there's a nice photograph of you, Margaret. And I thought, my goodness, is that me? Because I really was so thin. And my dad had said to me, Margaret, I don't know what's wrong, but I think you need to start eating or you won't be here. And that really was a wake-up call too, because I thought, I don't want to die. And so I made sure from then on that I had one meal every day. Anyway, life went on, and my job was good, and I got good promotions, and but again, would not. Relationships were very destructive initially, like most women, I would say. They can go through a time of being promiscuous, angry at themselves, but also angry at men. And I remember my attitude was, I'm going to treat you the way I've been treated. But anyway, over time, that all calmed down. And during those 9 years again, my father had died, and I was the youngest in the family and lived with my mum. And my mum, who had Parkinson's disease, died suddenly. Now, again, within what's known as post-abortion trauma, when another loss situation occurs, it can trigger unresolved grief. So again, I'd promised I would never go out with anyone from my work again, but I did. And this again was someone that didn't live in Scotland, so I didn't really know that much about him. And I was being made redundant and had a place at university to retrain. So my life was going to be different. Also, just to say, in that 9 years, there was a place where there was quite a deep self-hatred. I wouldn't say I was depressed, but life was never the same. It was as if I was on a level plane all the time. I was neither happy nor sad.
Yeah.
But with the unresolved grief, I wanted more from this relationship. And I did not know the chap that well at all. But anyway, sex occurred, and I'd started the course. And the only time I've ever missed a period was when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm pregnant, I know I am. And if I go early enough, the shame, the fear, because now I was 37, and I thought, this career woman, and how did I get into this situation again? Anyway, if I went early enough, it wouldn't be a baby. By this time, the abortion industry had progressed to having an office in Glasgow, so I thought, if I go early enough, I'll see what they say. So I was so ashamed going to that office, but again, the denial, it's not a baby. And well, the same questions is really what they asked me. Can you cope? Are you in a supported situation? And I said no. I said, can I have another abortion? Oh, yes, of course you can. This is the solution. You've got your life in front of you. As you're saying, you're on your own. And it was the same procedure. Yeah. And I travelled back down to Liverpool. Again, within the impact of abortion, although I went to the same clinic, I had no memory of that building whatsoever till the following morning. Wow. And it was the breakfast room, and it was, at that time, they would still smoke. So the walls were this dirty yellow, and it was just dark and morbid, and that just mirrored how I felt at that time. So anyway, a girlfriend had come with me, and when we travelled up home, the thoughts that I had was, like, what kind of woman was I? But again, not acknowledging the baby at all. So on my course, it required that I went away for 2 blocks of 12 weeks. And the only difference after the abortion was that I bled after the first abortion. There was no bleeding after the second abortion. Okay. And I'd been away for the 12 weeks. So when I came back home, I phoned BPAS and said, could I come for an examination? Because they offered this post-operative check. And so I went to the office, and the doctor who examined me asked me 2 questions. He said, have you been to Liverpool? And did you have the operation? And I really was puzzled and looking at him, because there was no question in my mind. I did have the operation. But again, the feelings that came up was there must be something really badly wrong with me. And he said, can I invite a colleague in to examine you? And I said yes. And the other doctor came in, he examined me, and he said, approximately 20 weeks gestation. So I said, are you saying I'm pregnant? And one doctor said yes, and the other doctor said no. We don't know what's in your womb, but we can arrange to send you for a scan. I went to the hospital, and absolutely petrified, because they had mentioned some sort of cancerous cyst that I might have, and but anyway, the nurse that I saw, the department was empty. And when I was shown into the room where the scan was going to happen, and she said, really so kind. Well, if you can imagine, I really was almost in bits. Yeah. And she said, just you watch that screen. She said, and you're going to be all right. So anyway, when she was scanning me, and there I saw a baby. And I saw this little heart beating and the arms and legs moving. And only the week before in lectures, I'd had the quickening, as they call it. The baby was moving and had grown enough for me to feel. And well, I thought that's what that was. But I thought it was the eating issue coming back again.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway, again, it was another watershed day for me. And I went home. I don't know when I spoke to BPAS again. I don't know if I phoned them, but the feelings that came up was the reality of seeing my baby. But what did I do 9 years before? And the feelings that I had were that I was dirty. The reality of my baby and what I'd done before. So, as a young woman, I had made a commitment in my teen years to God, and for a time had been walking His way. But I suppose you could identify me or call me a prodigal. And that day, really, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do with the guilt. And anyway, I just sat at home and I just prayed and asked God's forgiveness. And I just, believed I was in His presence. And a peace came, and I just knew deep inside that no matter what, things were going to be all right. So, I was 20 weeks and 4 days pregnant, and the 4 months later, I gave birth to a healthy daughter. And again, with post-abortion trauma, many women have feelings, particularly when they are pregnant again, that if they have unresolved emotional feelings, could they be a good mother? Could they love this baby because of what they had done? And although I didn't talk about it much, I remember saying to my sister, Marion, what if there is something wrong with me and I can't love this baby? And she said, no, Margaret, just you wait. And for me, that was the truth. As soon as they put my daughter in my arms, it was an unbelievable experience, and I was so thankful. And really that, God was giving me another chance. And what I didn't mention was that before I had the abortion, the chap, I didn't see him after that one occasion. Okay. We had argued because again, for me, it was as after it happened. Well, he was like, I guess, most men. I won't be seeing you again, so bye. But anyway, he had phoned just before Christmas, before I went for the examination, and he'd said he was coming back up to Glasgow. Oh, and he would love to see me. And I thought, oh yeah. So anyway, I spoke on the phone and said to him, well, I need to tell you that I became pregnant And he said, well, Margaret, that was maybe for the best because I'm married and I have 2 daughters. And I said, well, that maybe it was for the best. And that was that. But from having the pregnancy confirmed and living my life pregnant, and again, that was a hard time too in some respects, because I still was ashamed of what, at 37, what had happened. But again, not of the, let's say, the baby as such. But anyway, I prayed a lot about, well, I thought I had his real telephone number, because I argued with myself, does he need to know, and should I tell him? And anyway, he, the week before I went in to hospital, my due date, he phoned again to say he was coming up to Scotland, so could we meet up? And I said, oh, well, yes, please come to the house, because I'd left it with God that if the opportunity came, well, he had to know. And, well, I didn't have any milk at home that day when he came, so I got in my car, rushed to the shop, and just as I drove up, his car was at the door. And, well, of course, he's seeing me from the neck up, so as I got out and he's looking at me and shocked, and he said, my goodness, Margaret, what happened to you? And I said, well, it seems as if that abortion did not work and the pregnancy continued. And I suppose in some respects, I don't remember the shock in his face at that moment in time, but anyway, he came into the house and I said, I really believe you have to know this, because it's life, it's not, I said, the way I was living was all wrong. I said, and certainly the way you were living when you are married, I said, my life's going to change completely, but I said, you've got a choice here, how you're going to live your life. But I said, I really wanted to only ask you 2 questions. I said, I don't want anything from you. I said, but is there any health issues that might be a problem for the baby? And he said, no. And really, that was the extent of me telling him, well, you need to change your life. And he left that day, and I've never heard from him since. So, again, as time, well, God, as God is, he was so good, and I finished my course, I sat the exam, but where I thought I would have to work, well, it really was made clear to me if my daughter was only going to have one parent, she had to have 100% of me. So, and it was lovely to be a mum, having worked all these years and to do the things we did. And then, after being at home for a time, well, till she went to primary school, that again was when my life changed.
So, Margaret, what helped you begin a healing process then?
Well, really, becoming a Christian, or re-establishing my relationship with Jesus, because, well, reading the Bible is his word, and his word is life, and living the living word. So, and now there was 2 American psychologists, Christians, who came to Paisley, where I live, and they had done a lot of work in inner healing. And so I'd gone to to hear what they said, and well, I had prayer, and again, an interesting thing did happen, and because it is relevant because they talk about the babies in the womb. They've no feelings. And either pain or emotional feelings or whatever.
Yeah.
But my daughter wouldn't feed from me, skin to skin. And when I'd spoken to the psychologist, he said, well, and from reading of his work, he said, babies in the womb know when they're being rejected. But babies, in the unborn, are aware of so many things that it's only, again, in the following years that many have studied, that they can hear music, they know the mum's voice and the dad's voice and these things. But anyway, that was one thing that was an issue early on.
Do you think that if women and girls were provided with the right amount of support, that you would see more of them choosing life?
Oh, most definitely, because I then, say in 1988, became involved with a pro-life group. We had a speaker come to church, and there was a bill going through Parliament. So we had a day of life at our church, and so became involved after hearing about post-abortion trauma. And when the girls from SPUC heard my story, they said, would you like to come in an afternoon a week? Because we get calls from women. And so from there, I then, for the next 20 odd years, worked with SPUC in, I wasn't in the political area, but we were called British Victims of Abortion, and we set up a helpline, and the reality was that, well, I remember counting way at the beginning, when it wasn't talked about that much, but we had done some marketing in churches particularly, and I had 300 calls that year, and it was just me over time, and I was hearing the same thing all the time, that and the reality is that women really are not counselled in any way to understand their situation or their circumstance. They are counselled to abort so that the abortion providers can tick the boxes to make it legal. And so many, well, there'd be the group who would talk about, I didn't want to do it, but they were being coerced either by lack of support from family or the man involved, the father, or their circumstances, or fears, or there was the occasion when it would be maybe a medical problem with the baby, and again, they're not given the full information, they're not allowed to explore their circumstances, their situation. And what do you think about abortion? What is your feeling about it, and what is your feeling about the baby? Because the denial is the major thing that stops women from healing. Abortion is brutal. The baby's dehumanised, but women are dehumanised also, and they, well, today we've got the abortion pill, and it's abortion at home. And if abusers abuse over a long time, they are totally desensitized to what they do to the person they're abusing. And I see that in society. Our society has so denied the unborn child, but also the woman. And because the abortion pill is brutal. And all that I've heard on the telephone, and if they're on their own, they're frightened, the reactions that their body has, whether it's the extreme pain that many have or the bleeding. And the bleeding that can carry on for, I had one lady on the phone and she bled for 12 weeks after, because and she kept going to the doctor and she had a few other scans, but whatever was left of the tissue in her womb, whether it was afterbirth, they didn't deem it big enough. It will come away on its own.
Yeah.
So you can bleed for as long as it takes. And I thought,
Crazy.
So callous, really so callous.
What advice would you give to any woman who finds herself in that situation and thinks abortion is the only answer?
Well, I know that they more than likely will feel, because of 54 years of the rhetoric of the pro-choice movement, 54 years of abortion providers, where it's from the government down that they deny the reality of abortion. And for the general public, for the way our culture has gone, young people today, adults too, believe that sex is a recreational pastime. It certainly is not. And so the responsibility has been removed from the sexual act, that every time, even with contraception, you can become pregnant. So a woman that finds herself pregnant will think that is the quick fix.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is it fixes nothing. You exchange one set of problems for another. So I'm hoping that with more information going out into the marketplace, out into the public domain, that if you're pregnant, talk about your fears, find someone to talk to, look at your circumstances and your situation. I was the wee girl that played with her dolls till she was 13. So how could my head switch to aborting a baby? So again, in today's world, culture has such an influence. Education has missed the mark in with regard to relationships. Men need to be men, and women need to be women.
Yeah.
And there's boundaries that need to be put in place, because when things like an unplanned pregnancy occur, to choose abortion, you're denying yourself. The instincts that you have are to nurture. But again, that is not in our culture.
What would you like to say to abortion providers who may be oblivious to how this procedure would affect women?
Well, because I would say there's an underlying agenda going back to before the abortion law came into being. There is such a thing as eugenics, and I believe that underlies abortion and the provision of abortion. But the abortion providers have never acknowledged the research or asked women the right questions. How are you feeling after your abortion? So they've denied totally the after effects on women, and not only on women, because during my 20 plus years, at the end of a telephone, I've spoken to the fathers who struggle, who may be in denial initially, but then further down the line, like the young man whose friend asks him to go to pick up his wee boy from school, and an intelligent man, he gets to the school and he's looking at all these wee boys running around and kicking balls, and I thought, I could have a boy at this school at this age. And that was the beginning of the breaking of his denial. Wow. And he then thought about things, and like say he would drink to excess.
Yeah, to medicate it probably.
Yes, yeah. So the men who would come on the phone damaged, the grandfathers, grandmothers. The reality is that it's not just, or it's not only the baby and the mother.
Yeah.
All who have personal contact are impacted, but that's denied. Any man who goes along with a woman to an abortion clinic, and if he has any doubts and they think he may have stopped the woman, they're quite aggressive and leave the room and keep your opinions to yourself. And I've heard that many, many times. But so they deny post-abortion trauma. And I have said, I've spoken to them and I've said, well, what are you so afraid of? Why do you need to lie if abortion is the best solution? Because many who work in the abortion clinics, and I guess in Scotland, the NHS, are post-abortive too. Because the other thing that flags up is, and why the women who are aggressive about, if you were the silent witness outside an abortion clinic, the threat of anyone breaking their denial, because they've gone behind this wall and they've got to protect themselves. So therefore, that's why it's so aggressive. And again, I would say with the medics, well, I don't know for sure, but my thoughts on it are that I think the best way to put it is that abortion can never be objective. It's always subjective. And if I were in your situation, this is the answer, because that's what I would do. And also because, I could be wrong, but there's so many male doctors who are abortionists, and there's so many men, like maybe a better way to put this is, if there's been 10 million approximately abortions, because some will be repeat abortions, well, there's 10 million mothers, fathers, families, and society is a victim too.
That's
most definitely.
So important.
And the breakdown of the family, you could, I've heard it said that, like, say, abortion is the biggest issue that we face as human beings, and I would totally agree.
It's a really important point.
So, but again, this breaking someone's denial, that's why they're so aggressive. How dare you? These women are needing help and we're giving it. But the women, I always remember that saying that I would say the majority of women do so while the balance of their mind is disturbed. And it's not to make an excuse for the women, because it's across the board, age-wise, economically, from the poorest woman to the richest woman, who finds herself in a crisis pregnancy, is vulnerable. And unless she's given the opportunity to explore all her circumstances, to see, and it's not taking away her choice. Like, say, to make a choice, you've got to have all the information, and it is the only procedure that they don't need to give you information. That they're helping you, they're doing the right thing.
No, thank you so much for, you know, courageously sharing your story, and for all the great work that you do and offering hope to women as well. So thank you for joining in studio today and sharing your story. I have no doubt it will be powerful for lots of women to hear, and for everyone who's curious about the effects of abortion. So thank you for sharing. I really do appreciate that, and for coming in as well. So yeah, thank you.